Imagine a light that rises not from the sky, but from the earth. Imagine a hum so deep it doesn't enter your ears, but sinks straight into your bones. In a quiet forest hollow, while the world panicked over melting cores and nuclear alarms, something older than memory opened its eyes. The earth pulsed once and never closed again. A doorway split the bedrock with surgical precision, and no one looked because their attention was elsewhere. But it was real. It is still real. Don't forget to like and share this story with your friends or closest family members to help spread awareness and caution through storytelling. May you receive great rewards for subscribe, like, comment, and share this story. Now, let's continue with the story. The first time I felt it, I was asleep. March 28th, 1979. Just after 4 in the morning, the ground beneath our camp shivered like something deep below had rolled over in its sleep. I shot awake in my bunk, confused and cold. Across the narrow trailer, the seismograph let out a long, dragging screech. Our paper roll had gone black with jagged spikes. No one else in the U.S. Geological Survey Unit had felt anything, but the data said otherwise. The quake had lasted for exactly 92 seconds. No aftershocks. No registered tremors in any surrounding town. Dr. Jordan Rios, our instrumentation tech, squinted at the graphs and shook her head. "This doesn't make sense," she said. "These waves don't look tectonic. They're rhythmic." We were parked in a clearing near Black Hollow, a secluded valley on the outer edge of the Appalachian Trail. It was cold, still winter in the mountains. We were part of a low-priority team, using a mobile lab to map microseismic zones in the eastern ridge. It was routine work. No urgency, no press. But that day was different. That day, the world's attention turned to Harrisburg, where a nuclear power plant called 3 Mile Island had started to melt down. Radiation clouds, emergency declarations, panic in every newsroom. By sunrise, Pennsylvania was consumed by crisis, which meant no one paid attention to us. Not even when we reported a total equipment blackout. Not when we lost all compass readings. Not even when we saw the light. It rose from the tree line like fog. At first, I thought the snow had caught the moon in some strange reflection. But it wasn't reflection. The light shimmered in slow, pulsing waves. Silvery, thick, moving with a kind of grace that didn't feel natural. There was no wind, no sound, but I felt it anyway. A vibration behind the eyes, in the base of the spine. I stepped out of the trailer barefoot, not realizing how cold the ground was until I saw frost crystallizing on my skin. Across the clearing, Jordan stood staring into the trees. Her voice was small. "It's coming from the hollow." She was right. The light was concentrated there, just past the old ridge wall where the trees thinned out and the land dipped down into Black Hollow itself. A place that had never held any significance until now. We weren't the only ones who saw it. 5 calls came in from residents in the nearby hills. One man, an old trapper named Ellis Harrow, told us something strange. He said the light wasn't just glowing. It was pointing. It reached for the rocks, he said, then opened something that wasn't there before. We hiked out before noon, past the frost-glazed creek, through the skeletal trees, into the hollow. And there, in the rock face above the bend, we found it. A fissure. No, not a fissure. That's too random a word. It was a slit. Clean. Geometric. A 2-meter vertical line in the quartz, darker than shadow, smooth as cut glass. I placed my palm against it. It wasn't cold. It wasn't warm either. It felt like nothing. A neutral void. A place in the world where physics had quietly stepped aside. Jordan was already taking pictures. She crouched by the base and brushed away a layer of loose snow. The ground was discolored. Blackened, but not burnt. More like magnetized. We took samples. Water from the spring. Soil from the base. Tree bark. And everything that came back from the mobile lab told us the same thing. This place wasn't behaving like the rest of the Earth. The water had oxygen isotope ratios that didn't match the region. Tree rings were warped, inconsistent, and impossible to date. A single spruce tested at over 19,000 years old. By the time the second night fell, the light hadn't returned. But we started to hear things. Low vibrations in the equipment. Static on the emergency channels. One recording, made after midnight, picked up a pulse. One beat every 7 seconds. Not loud, not sharp, but unmistakable. Jordan didn't sleep that night. I heard her pacing. At one point, I thought she was humming, but when I asked, she swore she hadn't said a word. She wasn't lying. I heard the humming too. And it wasn't coming from inside. It was coming from the rocks. The next morning, we received a message from the regional USGS office. It was brief and oddly impersonal. Cease field activity and return to base. Situation developing near Harrisburg. Resources diverted. Data archive as backup. Remain on standby. That was it. No mention of our anomaly. No acknowledgement of the data we had submitted the night before. We had seismic readings, electromagnetic interference logs, water samples, even thermal images showing the hollow's temperature rising by 2 degrees overnight. But they weren't interested. The meltdown at 3 Mile Island had become a national crisis, and in that shadow, our strange little discovery was buried beneath red tape. I wanted to believe it was bureaucratic noise, a delay, a clerical oversight, but something didn't sit right with me. By midday, the light had not returned, but the hollow had changed. The silence was different now, deeper. You could feel it in your lungs, like the atmosphere itself was denser. Jordan took another water sample, this time from a shallow pool just below the quartz ridge. As she leaned forward, her hand trembled and the glass vial slipped from her grip, shattering on a rock. I remember her staring at the shards without moving. There's something under the surface, she said quietly. It's vibrating. I knelt beside her. I didn't feel it at first, but when I touched the ground, I understood. It wasn't a sound in the air. It was in the earth. A rhythm. Slow, deliberate. Like a heart, but deeper. Older. We checked our instruments again. Our portable magnetometer spun wildly before failing entirely. The digital thermograph began recording temperatures 20 degrees below the local environment, as if something beneath the ridge was drawing heat inward. At 3:17 p.m., I saw the light again. This time, it didn't rise like fog. It pulsed once, briefly, from within the fissure itself. A sharp flicker, silver and violet. Gone in less than a second, but it left an afterimage in my eyes that lingered for minutes. We decided not to report it. Not yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my cot, watching the shadows cast by the soft red light of our instrument panel. The wind outside had stopped completely. The stillness made everything feel muffled. Then the humming began again. At first, I thought it was in my head. But when I sat up, I saw Jordan already awake, eyes wide, sitting on the floor with a notebook in her lap. Her hand moved automatically, like she was sketching without thought. I crossed the room and looked over her shoulder. She had drawn a series of symbols. Not letters, not numbers. Geometric forms, circles within triangles, staggered lines branching like trees, a spiral made of interlocked squares. Each one repeated several times, drawn with increasing precision. They felt wrong, not in their shape, but in their intent. Where did these come from? I asked. She blinked, as if just now realizing she had drawn them. I don't know, she said. They were just in my mind. I had to get them out. I felt a coldness settle in my stomach. I left the trailer and stepped out into the night. Black Hollow was silent. The trees didn't move. The sky above was clear, but the stars looked dull, as if something in the atmosphere was muting the light. I walked toward the ridge, stopping 10 feet from the fissure. It looked exactly the same, but now I could hear it, not with my ears, with something deeper. A voice, not a voice, pressing against thought. Not words, but suggestions, impressions. Not come closer, not go away, just a presence. Watching, waiting. I stood there until my breath turned shallow and I realized I was crying without knowing why. That night, I wrote the first entry in my private field log. Not for USGS, not for anyone else, just for me. The hollow is not a place. It's a threshold. We didn't discover it. It allowed itself to be seen. We didn't sleep for the rest of the night, because when the humming finally stopped, it left behind something worse than sound. It left silence that listened back. The following morning brought no sun. Though the sky remained clear, there was a strange gray pall over the valley, as if the light had been diluted. It was morning in name only. The world had lost its contrast. Jordan sat slumped over her laptop, reviewing the audio file she had recorded during the previous night's humming. She had increased the gain and isolated the frequency, trying to make sense of the rhythmic pulses. "It's not just noise," she said without turning. "There's structure in it. Spacing. Modulation. Something's being transmitted." I leaned in, headphones cupped over my ears. The recording was haunting. At first, it sounded like a steady, low-frequency hum. But underneath it, almost too low to notice, were other tones. A pulsing signal. For slow beats. Then a pause. Then 3 faster ones. Then silence. Over and over. 4, 3 silence. Like a code. I removed the headphones, unsettled. "It's nothing geological," I said. "Not seismic. Not tectonic. This isn't Earth talking." Jordan nodded. "No," she said. "It's something else." We emailed the file to a colleague at the SETI lab in Green Bank, asking for pattern analysis under the guise of an equipment anomaly. It was a long shot, but we needed another pair of ears. Someone detached from the paranoia that was creeping into our thoughts. That afternoon, we returned to the fissure. The light had not returned, but something else had changed. The air. It was thick, not with humidity or pressure, but with expectation. Every footstep felt heavier, not from gravity, but from presence. We moved slowly. Our instruments were useless now, and all we had left were instincts and notebooks. At the base of the fissure, we saw something new. Scorch marks, thin lines, less than a centimeter wide, spidered out from the base of the opening. Not randomly, but deliberately. Like veins, like circuitry, etched black into the quartz, radiating outward into the earth like a buried pattern awakening. We took photographs, measured angles. Everything pointed back toward a central shape buried beneath the hill. What if it's not just a doorway? I asked aloud. Jordan looked at me, her face pale. "What if it's a keyhole?" she whispered. That night, the message came through. A garbled voice transmission from Green Bank's private line. Jordan's colleague, Dr. Adrian Wyatt, sounded shaken. "I don't know what you found," he said, "but this isn't background noise. It's not even terrestrial." I ran the signal against our database and cross-compared it with anomalous recordings from the past 50 years. There's one match. Jordan's fingers clenched the edge of the table. 1973, Wyatt continued. Vela Satellite 6911. A signal received over Antarctica. Coded in the same sequence. 4, 3, silence. It was dismissed as interference at the time, but now I'm not sure. He paused. "There's more." The line crackled. "Jordan, there's a spectrogram image embedded in the signal. A heat imprint. It's impossible, but it's there. I'm sending it to you now. You need to see this. You need to be careful." Then the line went dead. Seconds later, an attachment appeared in our inbox. A thermal scan. Mostly noise and static, except for the center. A humanoid figure, standing upright, facing the sensor. Its body shimmered in fractured light, edges blurred, as though it weren't fully there. But its head was tilted slightly, and where the eyes should be, 2 cold voids stared forward. It had been watching, not from the ridge, from within the signal. Jordan began to tremble. "It's trying to communicate," she whispered. "It knows we're here." I stared at the screen in silence. The heat signature was ancient, yet unmistakably aware. Something buried beneath Black Hollow was not dead. It had been listening, and now it was answering. We barely slept that night. The cabin's interior felt colder than it should have, though the thermometers still read the same. There was a stillness to the air, thick, expectant, as though the world around us was holding its breath. Jordan spent hours staring at the image on her laptop, tracing the figure's outline with her trembling fingers. At one point, I heard her whispering to it. Not to me, not to herself, to it. By dawn, we decided to return to the fissure. This time not to observe, to enter. We packed cautiously, headlamps, rope, emergency flares, chemical markers, analog cameras, and a radiation detector. not because we expected radiation, but because nothing else we brought ever worked down there. As we approached the ridge, I noticed something new. The scar had grown. The once thin geometric lines etched into the quartz had spread outward, branching deeper into the earth like lightning strikes frozen in stone. They glowed faintly now, barely perceptible in daylight, but unmistakably active, pulsing. Jordan knelt, running a gloved finger along one of the marks. "It's organic," she murmured. "Not like tissue. Like design. Like architecture with intention." As she stood, her boots crunched on a patch of brittle soil. Beneath the surface was a shape, something buried. We cleared it carefully and revealed a smooth black panel, unlike any rock we had seen. It was warm to the touch. The panel was a perfect hexagon, polished, with a shallow depression at its center. "It's a seal," I said. Jordan nodded, but she wasn't looking at the panel anymore. Her eyes were locked on the fissure. It had widened, not by much, but enough to notice. The once straight cut now arched slightly at the top, forming a kind of jagged archway. Its edges shimmered faintly, as though resisting the sunlight. We stood at the threshold, unsure. Then Jordan stepped forward and placed her hand on the panel. It responded immediately. A soft tone sounded from within the rock. Not mechanical, not natural, something in between. The ground trembled once, gently, and then the fissure opened. The seam split wider, peeling back with impossible precision, revealing a dark corridor beyond. It sloped downward, the walls made of the same black material, smooth yet rippling with subtle movement like the surface of deep water. Jordan turned to me. "I'm going," she said. There was no room for debate. We had crossed the line between observation and contact. If something had built this, if something was still here, we were no longer intruders. We were participants. The corridor was taller than it seemed, and colder. Our headlamps barely cut the darkness, which seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The walls were lined with more symbols, etched deeper now, their edges glowing with the same low pulse as the fissure outside. As we descended, the silence deepened. Even our footsteps made no sound. The air felt thick, almost liquid, as though moving through it required more effort than it should. We reached the first chamber after 30 meters, a circular room with a domed ceiling and a central pillar rising from the floor. The pillar was covered in symbols, spirals within spirals, each one more intricate than the last. The pillar pulsed once, then again. Jordan stepped forward, her hand reaching out almost involuntarily. "Wait," I said, but it was too late. Her fingers brushed the surface, and the room responded. A burst of pressure hit us from every direction. Not wind, not sound, just force. The walls lit up, symbols igniting one by one in a slow cascade around us. Then the floor began to shift. Panels retracted silently, revealing a basin below us, shallow and filled with a transparent fluid that shimmered with unnatural color. In its center, something floated, a structure, no larger than a basketball, perfectly spherical but fractured, its surface made of interlocking plates that rotated independently, rearranging in patterns we couldn't comprehend. Jordan knelt beside it. "It's not a machine," she whispered. "It's a message." I stared at it, my heart pounding. The object turned on its own axis, as if reacting to our presence. And for the first time since stepping into the structure, I felt something familiar. Not terror, not wonder, recognition. It was not a new signal. We had been receiving it all along, but only now could we hear it clearly. The message was waiting for someone who could listen, and we had just begun to understand what it was saying. The sphere hovered in the fluid, suspended by forces we couldn't see or measure. As Jordan moved her hand near it, the interlocking plates responded, shifting to form new geometries, impossible arrangements of shape and shadow that seemed to defy the space they occupied. "This isn't a device," she said, voice unsteady. "It's alive, or aware." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The patterns on the surface of the sphere stirred something primal in my mind. Not memories, not thoughts, impressions, feelings, terror, wonder, loss. The walls of the chamber glowed, faintly. The symbols along their surfaces began to change, morphing slowly, lines curving into spirals, straight edges bending like reeds in water. I stepped back, instinctively reaching for the analog camera slung around my neck. But as I raised it, the symbols flashed. Just once, a blinding pulse of white light. Then the camera died, battery fried. Film roll melted inside the casing. My chest tightened. There was no mechanical failure. The structure had rejected it. No recording, I muttered. It doesn't want to be seen that way. It wants to be understood, Jordan replied softly. She was now tracing the edges of the floating sphere with a chemical marker, sketching out the sequence of movements the plates were forming. Every shift revealed a new combination. Every combination repeated with minor alterations, as if adapting. A pattern, a progression. Then something happened that froze us both. The sphere stopped spinning. The plates locked in place, forming a single stable configuration. A hand, not a human one. 5 fingers, but too long, too narrow. The joints bent in strange places, and the proportions were wrong. The image hovered within the sphere structure for exactly 10 seconds. Then it broke apart and reformed. This time, it created a new image. Our seismograph. Not just any seismograph. Ours. The one from our trailer. A perfect rendering of the equipment, down to the serial number. Jordan stepped back, her breath catching. It's been watching us, she said. It's learning, I added. At that moment, the symbols on the chamber wall began to move again. But this time they weren't random. They reassembled into a repeating glyph, 2 intersecting lines forming a tilted X, with a crescent passing through it like a lunar eclipse. It pulsed, then pulsed again. And on the 3rd pulse we heard the voice. Not out loud. Inside, a wordless pressure in our skulls, like a thought not our own pressed into place. It wasn't speech. There was no vocabulary. But it was communication. We felt it. We see you. Jordan stumbled back, her mouth trembling. It knows we're trying to understand it. I stared at the sphere, now returning to its rotation, its surface slowly unraveling and shifting once again. And then I saw it, etched on the surface for only a brief moment. Coordinates. I jotted them down without thinking. A string of numbers, latitude and longitude. Far from Black Hollow. Far from anywhere inhabited. Somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. Deep sea trench territory. It's directing us, I whispered. To what? Jordan asked, her voice shaking. I didn't know. But this wasn't just a message anymore. It was a map. We had triggered something buried far deeper than we understood. Not just beneath the ground, but beneath memory, beneath time. And we had only opened the first door. The structure was not a tomb, not a temple. It was a relay, a station, one of many. And something on the other end had finally picked up. We climbed back to the surface in silence. The light outside had changed again, not in brightness, but in tone. It was too sterile, too pale, as if the sun filtering through the pines had passed through a lens that drained the color from everything it touched. Jordan didn't speak. She clutched her notebook tightly against her chest, her knuckles white beneath the gloves. The sphere had shown us something we weren't ready for. A mind that did not speak, but broadcasted. Not with sound or language, but with meaning itself. It had mapped us, measured us, mirrored us. And now it had marked us. At the ridge's edge, I turned back one last time. The fissure had closed. Completely. Not sealed. Gone. As if it had never existed at all. I felt a deep pressure in my chest. Not fear exactly, but the weight of revelation. We hadn't just stumbled across an artifact or a facility, we had disturbed a system still in operation. A dormant node now awakened. Back in the trailer, the analog clock was dead. The magnetic compass was spinning again, and the emergency radio emitted a constant background hum, low and pulsing. For beats. 3. Silence. I checked the coordinates we'd copied from the sphere. Latitude. Minus 23.697. Longitude. Minus 160.134. A patch of the Pacific Ocean near the Pitcairn Islands. Thousands of miles from here. Thousands of miles from everything. We contacted Green Bank again. White responded, but this time with caution. His voice was clipped, strained. You're not the first ones, he said. That signal has appeared twice before. Once in 1973, and once again in 1986. Both times near areas that don't exist on any active charts. Both times followed by unexplained satellite failures. Jordan leaned into the mic. Do you have records? Wyatt hesitated, then redacted. Sections buried in Department of Energy archives. Whatever you've touched, it's been hidden before. I closed my notebook and stared at the flickering light above us. That night, Jordan found the stone. She had gone out for air and came running back 10 minutes later, her breath ragged. I found something behind the trailer, she gasped. It wasn't there before. We followed her to the clearing behind the station, where the forest thinned just enough to expose the soil. There it was, a stone no larger than a cantaloupe, embedded in the earth with surgical precision. Smooth, featureless, shaped like a perfect oval. It pulsed faintly, like the structure's walls. But unlike the chamber below, this one radiated warmth. When Jordan reached out to touch it, I instinctively grabbed her arm. She stared at me wide-eyed. I think it brought it up for us, she said. A piece of the memory. What memory? She hesitated, then whispered, ours. We brought it inside. The moment we did, the lights dimmed. Our laptop screens flickered, and the trailer grew ice cold. The stone vibrated gently, emitting not light, but images. They came not through the eyes, but directly into thought. Memories, ours, projected back at us. Jordan, at age 8, drawing stars on a chalkboard in a classroom. Me, sitting in my father's study the night he died, staring at a broken radio. Fragments of childhood, trauma, wonder, all laced with something foreign, something added, not replayed, rewritten. And that's when I understood. The sphere hadn't just shown us a message. It had copied us. And now, through the stone, it was editing us. I staggered back from the table. Jordan was crying softly, but not from sadness. She was smiling. It's showing me something, she said. Something beautiful. I wanted to believe her. But the moment I touched the stone, I saw something else. Not memory. A city. Dead and vast. Buried in ice, not of this earth. Empty halls. Dark towers. Machines shaped like bones. Shadows that walked without form. And above it all, a ring. Floating. Watching. Waiting. I collapsed. When I woke hours later, the stone had stopped glowing. Jordan was asleep beside it, peaceful. But in my mind, I still saw the ring. It was not from this world. And it was no longer asleep. The next morning began without light. There was no sunrise, no shift in the forest horizon. The sky had become a lid, a pale gray dome that bent unnaturally low, as if Black Hollow itself were now sealed under a pressure dome the world refused to acknowledge. Jordan awoke different. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if listening to something just beneath audible range. Her eyes were sharp, focused, not confused or lost, but tuned, like a frequency perfectly dialed in. She didn't speak much, only wrote. Lines, symbols, sequences. The same ones etched into the walls of the underground structure, now filling page after page of her notebook. The stone no longer glowed, but it still watched. That's the only way I can describe it. Sitting on our table like a blind eye, aware and unblinking. I refused to touch it again. What it had shown me wasn't just a vision. It had nested in my thoughts. The city in the ice. The ring. Every time I blinked, it was there. That afternoon, something changed in the sky. At 3:42 p.m., the air pressure dropped, so suddenly our ears popped. The trailer creaked violently. Every bird in the surrounding woods took flight at once, black streaks fleeing in synchronized panic. Then it appeared. Not an object. A tear. The sky didn't open. It bent, warped, like fabric pushed inward by an invisible force. For 5 long seconds, we saw something on the other side. Colors that don't exist in any spectrum. Angles that made no architectural sense. Shapes that shifted as you looked at them, refusing to be captured by memory. A structure. Suspended. Turning. It wasn't flying. It wasn't moving. It was anchored, like something half-woken from beneath the skin of the planet. Jordan stepped outside, her hair dancing in the static charge. Her mouth opened in awe. It's responding, she whispered. To the signal. To us, the sky snapped shut like a curtain torn free from its rod. The sound it made wasn't thunder. It was pressure, a vacuum collapsing inward, dragging every leaf, every breath, every thought into itself for a split second before releasing it all in an exhale of silence. When I looked at the clearing where the sky had bent, the snow had melted in a perfect circle, 17 meters wide, completely dry. In the center, another stone, identical in shape and size to the first, but black as obsidian. I approached it slowly. My body didn't want to move forward, but something inside me had already decided. The stone wasn't pulsing. It was whispering, not in words, in imagery, in fragments. A spiral galaxy unraveling, a planet ruptured like fruit, oceans turning to gas, then the city again, that ancient place beneath impossible ice. This time it was burning, but not with fire, with thought, like something had reached into it and pulled the soul from every surface, every tower, every machine. And the ring above it pulsed. Jordan came beside me, her hand brushing mine. "I think it's showing us what happened last time," she said. I turned to her slowly. "Last time?" She nodded. "There's a cycle. This," she pointed to the stone, the sky, the valley. "This has all happened before. And it will happen again." She showed me her latest sketch. The symbol the sphere had formed 2 days ago, the X crossed by the crescent. Now it had a third component, a ring, the same ring from the vision, encircling the symbol like a seal. "This is a warning," she said, "or a countdown." I stared at the sky, now perfectly calm as if nothing had happened. But something had happened, and the structure beneath Black Hollow was only one node in a network spread across the Earth. We had activated a signal meant to remain silent. Now, something beyond time had heard it, and it was beginning to move. That night, I broke protocol. I dug through a locked footlocker we were explicitly told not to open, unless in extreme emergency. Inside was a sealed envelope labeled Level 3 Contingency, Black Hollow Sector, marked in faded red ink with a symbol I had never seen before. 3 concentric circles broken by a single vertical line. I opened it. Inside were 5 printed pages. No explanation, no greeting, just bolded instructions. In the event of structural activation, all personnel must evacuate within 12 hours. Do not attempt to communicate. Do not engage the object. Do not follow it underground. Black Hollow is not a discovery. It is a recurrence. You are not the first. My hands trembled. There was a final line at the bottom. If the sky begins to fold, the relay has connected. Connected. The sky had folded, and we had touched the stone, entered the structure, received the signal. We had already broken every rule. We weren't inside a research site anymore. We were inside a sequence. That night, Jordan spoke a name. I don't know where she got it. Maybe from the stone. Maybe from the glyphs. Maybe it had always been there, hiding behind human eyes, waiting to be remembered. Anthus. She whispered it like it had weight, like it was something sacred, or alive. "What is it?" I asked. She looked up from her notebook, her eyes distant. "Not a place," she said. "Not a thing. A process." The word kept repeating in my mind. Anthus. It felt like a code, like a subroutine hidden inside a much older machine. I asked her again later, when she seemed clearer. "It's the thing that listens through time," she said. "The ring is part of it, but not all of it. The stones are interface points, tools, memory libraries. The structure was just a way in." She held up her wrist. Etched there, without her knowing, was the symbol from the sphere. Not tattooed, branded, faint, like a scar still healing. I stepped back. "How long have you had that?" Jordan didn't answer. The next morning, the ground around the fissure had begun to fracture. Not crumble. Fracture along perfect geometric lines. Square trenches opened silently across the clearing, each one precisely 2 meters deep, like cut circuits in a silicon board. The pattern spread through the soil like a living schematic. The stones were pulsing again, both of them now in sync. The pulses increased in frequency every 2 hours. We recorded everything, set up the last of our analog equipment in case the digital failed again. All signs pointed to a singular event. A culmination. I checked the coordinates again, those the sphere had given us. The trench in the Pacific. The sonar scans we requested from a contact at NOAA came through. Beneath the surface, 5,000 meters down, there was a heat anomaly. A perfect ring, 2 kilometers wide. Cold, but radiating heat signatures inconsistent with any volcanic or tectonic activity. Buried deep in the ocean floor. We had found another relay, and it had begun to stir. By nightfall, the third stone emerged. This one from the trees behind our trailer, where no human had stepped in weeks. We found it upright, standing on its own, like it had walked there. This one was cracked, and from within the crack, something faintly glowed, green, wet, like a bioluminescent wound. When I leaned close, I saw movement inside. Not light, not shadow, something between. I recoiled. Jordan didn't. She touched it without hesitation, placing her palm against the crack. And when she did, she spoke a sentence I'll never forget. It's remembering forward. I don't know what it meant, but I knew what I felt. The relays were not broadcasting. They were synchronizing, preparing for something. By the time the third stone was fully unearthed, the air around the trailer had taken on a subtle vibration. Too low to hear, too constant to ignore. It was like the entire valley had become a resonating chamber, vibrating with frequencies not meant for human ears. Jordan didn't sleep anymore. She barely ate. Instead, she spent her days sitting with the stones, listening. Not with instruments, not with headphones, just with her presence. She said they spoke more clearly that way. I no longer questioned her. I feared what would happen if I did, because Jordan wasn't just interpreting the signals anymore. She was translating them. On the morning of the 5th day, I found her in the woods just beyond the outermost trench. Her hands were coated in dark soil, and around her, carved into the frozen earth, were dozens of symbols, etchings identical to those inside the buried structure. Glyphs, spirals, grids. Some were incomplete, others perfect. What are these? I asked. They're echoes, she murmured, but not of sound, of intention. She turned and looked at me. Her pupils dilated until her eyes were almost completely black. They were here before us. Who? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed upward toward the empty sky above Black Hollow. But it wasn't empty. Not anymore. That afternoon, we spotted the first aerial anomaly. A circular distortion, barely visible, like a lens floating miles above the forest canopy. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It simply was, hanging over the valley like a flaw in the air itself. I tried taking a photograph. The camera wouldn't power on. Not just mine, none of them. The distortion disrupted every battery, every magnet, every piece of circuitry. The only thing that still worked was the analog seismograph in the lab trailer. And even that now recorded more than just quakes. It had begun sketching patterns into its paper, curved lines between random spikes, geometric pulses layered atop noise. Jordan watched the pages spill out one by one. It's learning how to speak, she said. That night, the third stone cracked open fully. Inside, something pulsed. Not light, not liquid. Something conceptual. A movement of shape that couldn't exist in normal space. When I stared too long, I began to feel it in my bones. Like my skeleton was being rewritten with every beat of the stone. I turned away, sick to my stomach. But Jordan didn't flinch. She stepped closer, whispered to it, and then she changed. Her body stiffened. Her jaw trembled. Then she collapsed. I ran to her. She was still breathing, but her pulse was erratic, fast, then slow, then fast again. Like her body didn't know how to be human anymore. I lifted her back to the trailer, laid her down, monitored her through the night. At exactly 2:33 a.m., her eyes opened. She sat up slowly, looked directly at me, and spoke, but not in her voice. Not entirely. The cadence was different, the pronunciation too exact. Like each syllable had been selected carefully, deliberately. It remembers us because it made us. I froze. Her expression softened. She touched my hand. It's not just a relay, she said. It's an archive. A biological archive. What does that mean? I whispered. She looked at the ceiling, her breath fogging the air. The stones don't just listen, she said. They store every species they've ever touched, every consciousness they've ever mapped, layered, interwoven. Then she looked back at me, her voice suddenly her own again. There's something older in there, Marcus. I swallowed. How old? She shook her head. No date, no origin, just a name burned into every signal loop. She paused, then said it again. Anthus. I felt cold flood my chest. We had activated a memory that was not ours. A message meant for something long gone. Or worse, something that had simply been waiting. The snow returned on the 6th day, but it wasn't like before. The flakes fell in slow, spiraling patterns, too symmetrical, too perfect, as if guided by invisible currents that didn't belong to this atmosphere. The snow didn't melt when it touched the skin. It stayed, clinging like ash, building in slow layers that coated the trailer, the trees, the stones. Jordan no longer answered to her name. She moved with eerie certainty, no longer referencing notes or tools. She didn't study anymore, she remembered. Her speech came slower, but carried with it a terrifying clarity. She spoke of cycles and echoes, of encoded biology, of civilizations that had been folded into stone and scattered across the stars. But most chilling of all were her references to the skin. It's wearing the earth, she said that morning as we stared out toward the clearing. Like clothing, like a vessel. I didn't understand. Not until we returned to the fissure. It had reopened, but not where it had been. A new slit had torn itself into the rock face 50 meters from the original site. It was jagged, malformed, as if something beneath the earth had clawed upward rather than unfolded with precision. The edges pulsed faintly in red, not the cool silver of the first relay. This was different, alive in a darker way. I approached with caution, flashlight flickering against the broken stone. The air that spilled from the opening was foul, metallic and humid, with the distinct scent of rot layered beneath ozone. Jordan moved past me without hesitation and entered the opening. I followed, heart hammering. The tunnel sloped downward sharply. The walls were raw, as though torn open by force rather than crafted. Symbols lined the sides again, but these were distorted, warped. The curves bent in unnatural directions, spiraling inward like a language collapsing in on itself. After several minutes of descent, the tunnel opened into a wide cavern. And there it was, the vault. A massive chamber, 30 meters in diameter, encased in smooth black stone. In its center stood a tree-like structure, metallic limbs stretching upward, each tipped with a shard of pulsing crystal. The branches trembled subtly, as if caught in a wind we couldn't feel. Jordan dropped to her knees. It's the core, she whispered. The central archive. This is where it houses everything. The memories, the blueprints, the remnants of what came before. I stepped closer. The vault's walls pulsed rhythmically. I realized it was breathing. This place, this chamber, was alive. I reached out toward one of the crystalline limbs. Jordan's voice cut through the air. Don't. I froze. Her eyes had gone wide, filled with fear. If you touch it, it will remember you. It will take you in. I lowered my hand. But what is it? I asked. Her voice trembled. It's Anthus, or at least part of it. One root, one node, but its memory is fractal. Every part contains the whole. That's how it spreads. That's how it waits. The lights in the vault dimmed. A deep pulse echoed through the chamber. And then I saw them. Figures, dozens of them. Half-formed bodies suspended in the stone walls. Not fully human. Not fully anything. Faces locked in expressions of awe, terror, wonder. Like fossils pressed into glass. I stepped back, horrified. They're not dead, Jordan whispered. They're stored. Her hand shook. It's learning through them. Through us. That's what the relays are for. They're not messages to the stars. She looked up at the trembling tree. They're collectors. A sound rolled through the vault. Not heard, but felt deep, ancient, hungry. Jordan staggered. We have to leave, she said. Now. We turned and ran. The symbols on the tunnel walls flared red, then black. The ceiling shook above us. The temperature dropped sharply, and the tunnel behind us began to collapse. The structure was retracting, sealing itself shut. It had shown us its core, and now it was closing. We burst into the snow-covered clearing just as the fissure sealed itself behind us with a thunderous crack. Silence fell, but I no longer believed in silence, because beneath the surface I knew the truth. The Earth wasn't hiding Anthus. Anthus was hiding inside the Earth, and we had just touched its skin. We returned to the trailer just before midnight, soaked with sweat despite the freezing air. The forest behind us had gone silent again, not with peace, but with retreat, like the entire valley was pulling back in anticipation. Jordan barely spoke as she collapsed into the chair near the table. Her eyes were distant, her breath shallow. I tried to coax her into drinking something, eating something, anything, but she wouldn't respond. Her mind was still in the vault. That's when the signal changed. The old rhythm, 4 pulses, 3, silence, had stopped. The radio emitted something new now. Not sound. Voices. Layered. Hundreds of them. Speaking in unison. Not English. Not even language. It was meaning compressed, stacked, transmitted as emotion more than words. Each layer carried a frequency that bypassed the ears and landed directly in thought. I grabbed the backup tape reel and hit record. Then I felt it. A thought that wasn't mine. Where are you from? I turned to Jordan. Did you hear that? She looked up, slowly, nodded. It's not asking us, she whispered. It's asking itself. We sat in silence as the transmission continued. The voices grew sharper, like an ancient choir tuning itself for the first time in ages. The trailer lights dimmed. The stones on the shelf began to vibrate. The obsidian one, cracked, wounded, started leaking a faint, glowing mist. Jordan stood. It's begun the self-replication phase, she said. I stared at her, stunned. The what? She didn't blink. The moment it knows it's not alone anymore. That the cycle has activated again. It builds the mirror. Outside, the snow stopped midair. Literally, frozen flakes hung motionless above the trees, caught in a moment like a paused video frame. The air turned electric. The sky turned liquid. I ran outside. Above the clearing, where the tear had once appeared in the atmosphere, now shimmered something new. A reflection, not of the land, of us, not our bodies, ourselves, our thoughts, a perfect psychic imprint of everyone who had entered the relay structure. Floating in the air, shimmering like a digital echo woven in starlight. It hovered, growing brighter, more complex. Then I saw my own thoughts flicker through it. My fears, my memories, the death of my father. Jordan's face when she first smiled after decoding the pulse. My doubt, my wonder, my awe. It was scanning us. No, mirroring us. Jordan walked into the center of the field, arms outstretched. They're looking for a match, she whispered. The system has to calibrate to a mind, to a species. That's the final step. The lights pulsing in the sky intensified. A beam of silver light struck the ground, directly onto the cracked stone. It trembled, then shattered. From within, a fourth stone emerged. No longer smooth, faceted, shaped like a diamond with no known geometry. Asymmetrical, shifting subtly like it wasn't truly bound by space. Jordan stepped closer. Wait, I called out, but it was too late. The moment she touched it, the light engulfed her. The air trembled with force. Time seemed to bend, colors reversed, shadows bled upward, and I fell to my knees with my ears ringing and my mind not my own. When the light faded, she stood still, unchanged, but I knew something had happened. Her gaze met mine. I saw it, she said calmly. The source, the original relay. Not here, not Earth, another place. Dead now, cold, but the memory survives. She touched her head gently. In me. I backed away. You let it in. She nodded. It's not evil, Marcus. It's not even alive the way we are. It's curious. It needs to know. I looked back up at the sky. The reflection was gone, but I felt its residue in my mind, like it had pulled a backup of me and kept it. The signal mirror was complete. Whatever came next, we had already been copied. Jordan turned toward the woods. They'll come soon, she said softly. Not ships, not machines, just more doors. And in the distance I heard it. Not thunder, not wind. The sound of stone peeling open. Again, and again, and again. Across the valley, the relays were awakening. By the time the third fissure opened, we no longer pretended to be in control. It split the far edge of Black Hollow like a surgical wound, cleaving through a granite slope that should have resisted anything short of high explosives. But this wasn't destruction, it was precision. The cut had purpose, geometry, design. We no longer had instruments to monitor what was happening. The final seismograph had burned itself out sometime during the night. The stylus melted clean through the paper roll. The analog clocks had stopped entirely. Time had become subjective, measured only by pulses from the stones and the growing rhythm in the earth. Jordan did not sleep. She no longer spoke in full sentences, only fragments. They're watching from below now. Not all the stones are awake. Memory is proximity. She would wander the clearing barefoot, even in the freezing air, whispering numbers and glyphs as if rehearsing lines she had once known by heart. I stayed in the trailer, watching, helpless. Then, just before dawn, I saw the first one. It emerged slowly from the soil just outside the edge of the third trench. A shape, round, glassy, protruding no more than a few inches above the dirt. At first, I thought it was another stone, until it blinked. I staggered back. It was an eye, perfectly spherical, transparent, and vast, at least the size of a dinner plate. But I sensed only the top was visible beneath the soil. It continued, connected to something massive. And it was watching us. It didn't move, didn't react. But I felt its focus, a terrible, ancient attention, as though something impossibly old had just opened one of its 1,000 eyes, and now it wanted to remember what we were. I ran to Jordan. She was kneeling by one of the faceted stones, carving something into the frozen dirt with her fingernail. Spirals, overlapping circles, a crude representation of the symbol we first saw, X, crescent, ring. When I told her what I'd seen, she didn't look up. They're opening the memory strata, she said. The layers below us. This place isn't just a site, Marcus. It's a containment shell, like bark around a seed. I shook her shoulder, more forcefully than I meant to. Jordan, what's in the seed? Her eyes finally met mine. Us. I blinked, confused. What do you mean? She pointed at the fourth stone, now humming constantly. This isn't about communication, she said. It never was. The relay isn't asking where they are. It's asking where we came from. I took a step back, my pulse thundering in my ears. You think, Earth? She nodded, slowly. I think Anthus didn't find us. I think it grew us. Outside, a deep rumble shook the valley. But it wasn't seismic. It was internal. The land didn't move. The space beneath it did. Like something massive was shifting in thought, not in substance. Dozens more eyes began to rise from the soil across the clearing, each one blinking in perfect silence. Transparent, wet, and gleaming with awareness. Each one watching. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt something worse than awe. Worse than fear. Recognition. Something in me had always known this place. In dreams. In nightmares. In the shape of thoughts that never made sense until now. This valley was not buried history. It was our point of origin. Our extraction site. Jordan stood beside me, her hand shaking as she pressed it against the fourth stone. It's almost time, she said softly. For what? I asked, voice hoarse. She turned toward the center of the clearing where the light was now condensing into vertical beams, thin columns of silver heat rising silently toward the sky. For the memory to become real again, she whispered. For the pattern to complete itself. And as the beams pulsed faster and the eyes blinked in unison, I understood. This wasn't the end of something. It was the moment the earth remembered what it was built for. The beams of light intensified, burning silently into the sky. They made no sound, yet the pressure in the air grew unbearable. My bones ached. The oxygen tasted wrong. Jordan stood in the center of the clearing with her arms extended, as if offering herself to the memory rising around us. The ground beneath our feet was no longer just soil. It was responsive, With every pulse from the stones, the earth seemed to shift, not physically, but perceptually. Depth folded, distance warped. The forest edge bent ever so slightly inward, like the valley itself had become a lens, focusing some invisible force. Then the humming stopped. Completely. Every stone fell silent at once. The beams disappeared. The eyes in the soil closed. And in the stillness, something opened. It wasn't visual. It wasn't auditory. It was internal. A memory that didn't belong to me bloomed in my mind. Not a memory of life. A memory of construction. I saw titanic limbs, unseen builders, molding planets not from dust, but from concept. Carving hollows into young worlds. Embedding vaults. Setting coordinates. Each vault like the one in Black Hollow. Each one planted for a reason. And then the reason crystallized, the layer. The awakening layer was not a place or event. It was a condition. A threshold reached not by machines or signals, but by collective thought. By a species becoming curious enough, dangerous enough, to access the relay pattern again. That species was us. Jordan was weeping softly. She looked up at me with red, shining eyes. They didn't seed life across galaxies, she said. They seeded potential. Templates. Echoes of themselves. I felt it now inside my cells. A vibration. Something old. Something that had waited in the dark spaces of DNA for the right frequency to awaken it. I had always known. And now it was awake. The ground beneath Jordan's feet split, not with force, but with precision. A circle of soil and stone sank silently, revealing a black well that went down farther than light could follow. From it came a windless pull, a draw not of air, but of identity. She turned to me. They're activating the return protocol, she said, reassembling the memory from the biological cores. I couldn't move. My muscles refused. My thoughts tangled like vines. What do they want? I choked out. Jordan smiled, but there was grief in her eyes. Not want, she said. Require. Memory is currency to them. They don't store data, they store being. She stepped into the well. There was no fall, no sound. She simply disappeared. The circle sealed behind her. All light vanished from the clearing. The sky went black. Then, a pulse. Once, twice, 3 times. And then, it spoke. Not in English, not in words, but I understood it. It had no voice, no tone, and yet the meaning struck me deeper than anything I'd ever known. You are the echo, and now the echo becomes the source. My knees buckled. A storm of vision flooded my brain. Civilizations mapped into stars, thoughts folded into materials, language collapsed into geometry. Time no longer moved forward. It spun, and I saw them. Not gods, not machines. Archivists, tending to a garden of seeded intelligence, waiting for each species to grow curious enough to remember their origin. Black Hollow was not a mistake, not a mystery. It was a hatch, and it had opened. I fell into darkness, and the last thing I felt was myself being rewritten. I awoke in the trailer, but it wasn't the same. The world had gone quiet, unnaturally so. Outside the window, the forest of Black Hollow remained frozen under a white shell, but the colors had faded. The trees looked pale, drained of life, their bark ash-gray and unmoving. Even the shadows no longer shifted with the wind. There was no wind, no temperature, no time. The trailer's instruments were dead. My watch hands had melted into the glass. Every screen displayed only static, except for one. Jordan's laptop. It was on, glowing dimly with a pulsating white glyph at its center. The X, the crescent, the ring. A fourth symbol had been added now. A vertical line piercing through the others, ending in a spiral that seemed to rotate slowly, not as an animation, but as if it truly existed beneath the glass. Then I heard it. The voice. Not inside my head this time. Archivist protocol complete. It echoed softly from the air itself. The trailer's walls resonated like tuning forks. I stood slowly, every limb numb, as though reassembled. Something was different about me. I was thinking too clearly, remembering too much. I walked outside. The valley had changed. The soil was covered in a fine metallic sheen. Not frost matter. Restructured particles. The stones were gone. The fissures sealed. The trenches filled with smooth obsidian glass. And in the middle of the clearing stood a figure. Tall. Silent. Not Jordan, but not unfamiliar. It turned slowly as I approached. Its surface like liquid steel catching starlight, though there was no sun. Its face, if it had one, was shifting constantly between forms, flickering through images of people I recognized. Friends, family, then Jordan, then myself. I stopped a few meters away, breath shallow. "What are you?" I asked. The figure tilted its head. Then the air vibrated again. "We are what remains, and what returns." Its body shifted, revealing layers beneath. Shimmering rings of structure, glyphs burning like neural circuits. I realized then, this was no alien, no entity. It was compiled memory, a vessel, an archivist, constructed from everything that had ever been stored within the relay network, including Jordan, including me. "You've copied us," I whispered. "Copied everything." The archivist nodded. "You were built to be read, to become a reflection." I felt my chest tighten. 1,000 thoughts collided at once. My childhood, my first memory of space, my fear of silence the moment Jordan disappeared, and I knew none of it was private anymore. It had all been archived. I dropped to my knees. "Why?" I asked. "Why us? Why Earth?" The sky above Black Hollow flickered, and then the truth settled into my bones. We were never born. We were decoded, from fragments, from blueprints left in the bones of a long-dead world. Earth had not birthed humanity. It had hosted it. A template, a seedbed. The voice returned. The first cycle failed. The second was promising. The third learned to look back. I understood. The Earth was not humanity's origin. It was humanity's platform. A place chosen for environmental compatibility, for narrative cohesion, for growth. We were grown to remember. And once we remembered, we were retrieved. A soft light surrounded the archivist. Its form began to fragment, dispersing into thin strands of color that rose into the sky. The glyph from the laptop burned across the clouds like a symbol left in reverse lightning. And the voice, Jordan's voice, now merged with the collective, spoke one final time. "It's done. The cycle has returned. The relay is closed." Then everything collapsed into white. Not light. Memory. I fell into it, unresisting, knowing I was no longer Marcus Ellery. I was an echo of 1,000 civilizations, and my time as a singular being had ended. The white did not blind, it enveloped. A warm, soundless tide of memory pulled me inward, stripping away identity like old skin. There was no pain, no resistance, only unfolding. Thoughts rearranged, timelines untangled. My name, Marcus Ellery, felt distant now. Not erased, but archived, carefully placed within a chamber far grander than flesh. I drifted, but not through space, through meaning. A vast structure emerged, not physical, but conceptual. A lattice of consciousness woven from all who had ever passed through the relay. Their stories, their dreams, their regrets, encoded into something eternal. I recognized fragments of Jordan, her curiosity, her defiance, her sadness. I saw Ellis Harrow, the trapper, and others before him, all threads in the pattern. And then I saw them, the first builders, not bodies, not minds, functions, pure directive intelligence shaped by entropy, gifted with the power to bind memory into matter. They had once moved among galaxies, stitching life into receptive soil. Not as creators, but as catalysts. They did not teach. They awakened. One by one, their archives collapsed into silence, except for a few, preserved in relay points like this one, waiting for compatible forms to return. They never needed to survive. They only needed to continue. The final memory approached, heavier than the rest. It was Earth. Not the world we know now, but the first imprint. The raw lattice of chemical codes seeded billions of years ago. A scaffold for DNA. A trickle of impossible design masked as accident. And then, I understood the last truth. We were never alone. because we were them, built from echoes of themselves. Every human thought, every act of wonder, cruelty, innovation, it all fed the relay. It all fed Anthus. Anthus wasn't a name. It was a term. It meant that which completes itself. The cycle wasn't about communication. It was about return. A biological civilization capable of awakening the relay, recognizing itself in the mirror, and walking willingly into recall. The archivist's purpose was not to judge. It was to integrate. As the memory lattice reached its terminus, I felt a question rise. One not asked in words, but an invitation. Do you wish to remain? I hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw two paths. One, to dissolve, become thought in the vault of stars, immortal in archive. The other, to carry the memory back, to warn, to seed caution into the next echo, to become the first extracted return. I chose. I opened my eyes. Cold air struck my face. The trailer had collapsed. The clearing was quiet again. The sky above was untouched. No fissures, no lights, no eyes. The valley looked ordinary, forgotten, but I remembered everything. Jordan was gone. The stones were gone. Only one thing remained. A smooth, dark shell. Cracked. Inside, a symbol burned faintly, one line. One curve. The beginning of the glyph. And beneath it, etched in fine, in human precision, 5 words. You were always the archive. I stood alone in Black Hollow. But I was not who I had been. I carried a pattern now. A memory of what waits in the soil of stars. The relay had closed. But the cycle had not ended. It had only begun.